Hello again. I want to address with you the topic of the 4 ways of connecting with our partner. These are ways in which we can create a vision and shape in our partner relationships. This vision and shape is largely associated with the framework of dynamics in our relationship and the roles that we create and live out in relation to each other. These 4 ways that shape the boundaries and image of our partnership are largely related to the accepting role and the giving role, or the more familiar principle about which so many have written to me and asked me about, the principle of giving and receiving in partnership relations. With regard to this principle, everyone wants to understand where the balance is. Where are the infringements? What is the psychological point of view? And a little more about how to take a look at this analysis of the topic of the giving and receiving self. The first thing that I want to present to you is about the way of connecting. The framework in our relationship is such. If you would, take your hands and slowly bring them together so that your palms and fingers are aligned. Imagine that your hands are just like 2 partners who meet and create their relationship. Partner 1 and partner 2 meet in all their authenticity, as they are. They meet with their conscious beliefs, values, notions, needs, and desires. But they also meet with a very unconscious dynamic that each of us carries within us. The things they have suppressed, unacknowledged pains, our unacknowledged and unresolved fears, the doubts and critiques of the shadow side within us that also exist in our unconscious dynamics. The traumas and misunderstandings that have occurred in early childhood, and this whole palette of colors in our mental dynamic we confront with our partners. There will be many areas in which our partners will serve as a resource to us. They will be our equals, and together we will seek joy and a common purpose. But there will be also many areas where we will have to work on our divergences, different perspectives, and aspirations, to work on our fears together. But first, when we set out to face our divergences or seek the resolution of conflict as a couple, we need to first pay attention to what our personal topics are that we need to work on. Because to a large extent, what we have not resolved internally in ourselves, that is a part of our history, and eventually it is something that we will project onto our partner. Unconsciously, we expect our partner to fulfill our inner fantasies and preconceived ideas, to give us a relationship, to care for us, to give us pleasure that we have never received, perhaps when we were younger from the relationship with our parents, or perhaps in previous relationships and injuries from partner relationships. But in one way or another, this is a topic that first is about personal responsibility. Personal responsibility meaning this: what can I learn? What hurts me? And what personal work do I need to do first on myself so that I can delve into making the relationship with my partner more harmonious and more successful? And the first way of connecting is when one partner decides to be more active. He or she fills the more active or more giving role. She begins to make lots of decisions, to make choices, to steer the relationship, to fill it with substance. And the other somehow remains more passive, more supportive, more accepting, as if they are the follower. And here, the dynamic takes place in a movement that looks like this. When one is very active, he offers an idea. Then he finds a way to do it. He only takes the other partner with him to be present with him in this relationship or that choice of event. However, in this way, there is no balance, and the natural movement is disturbed. Because even in the beginning, everyone needs to feel satisfied with the role that they play. I need to be more passive, and the other person needs to be more active. This should also be thought of as a form of predominance in relationships. Of course, we do have a bit of everything. To be active and passive, speaking and keeping quiet. But every given couple falls into one of these categories of connection, expressed in these ways. So I ask you to look at what the predominant movement is for you. What is the main role that you choose to play most often? Because this will determine the framework and precisely the shape of your connection. When someone is overly active, and this is the most frequent way that they choose to behave towards the partner, this means that this person has somehow crossed the boundary of healthy generosity and openness, and seems to be crossing the boundary of giving up herself to overgive to the other. She tries to think for him, to choose for and in place of him, to fill in some of his gaps, needs, desires. It is as though striving to be active makes her valuable, special. It gives her more of a reason to be present, somehow to be more noticed this way, or to finally get the satisfaction and appreciation, the praise that she has projected onto the partner, because in the past she has needed to receive this from one of her previous authority figures, from her mother or from her father, where more was required. There, I was expected to abide by their structures, to fulfill their wishes and notions. My role as a child was to fulfill my parents' idea of what it meant to be successful and good. And thus, when I fulfill the internal vision, which is the greatest dream of my parents, I will receive love, praise, and approval. And somehow, we can get stuck in this past struggle to hear and to satisfy more than anything the needs of the other person, the authority figure, the one who matters, so that he can feel meaningful when I make sense of his desires and needs, when I fill him with substance. Only that when this is carried over into a partnership experience, we continue to strive to attune ourselves to someone else's wishes and needs. But this is not our only role. And here, by staying in the role of the giving self, we can violate the boundary of healthy giving. When someone starts to overgive, to try to appease the partner, and to try to understand what their frameworks are, we constantly enter into this aspiration to fulfill their frameworks, to make the partner feel comfortable, to show that we can mimic their various desires and needs. But at some point, this hyperactivity of ours starts to exhaust us. In the beginning, we like it. With it comes adrenaline, and we feel a sense of pleasure. Here we become special to the partner. We become this magic that he or she has not received before. We quickly develop the intuition necessary to pick up on her needs and desires, attempting to fulfill her fantasy, to fill her with joy, and with travel experiences, and with words, and with care. But at some point comes a deep fatigue. There is no way adrenaline can constantly keep us in such an active position, because it is not natural to be in a movement that is in only one direction. There is no way. Burnout comes in relationships too. So when we become hyperactive, giving a lot, when I give a lot, I make the other indebted to me. Because in doing so, striving to constantly put myself out there through the fulfillment of the other partner's expectations to be the good one and the one to convey meaning to the partner. At some point, without the partner having asked, I continue to give and strive to detect their needs. But when I give a lot, I put myself in a position of idealization. I am the one who can always do more. I have the energy. I have the strength. I can pick up on what's happening. I can make it happen. I'll play all sorts of different roles for you, fulfilling your various needs. I am something that is so multi-layered and that you cannot attain, so much so that I am already developing the very perverse need to constantly strive to satisfy your ideas and desires. Because somehow, this is how we make sense of ourselves. But when I overgive, I pour an investment of energy and attention into the relationship. And when the other partner starts only to accept, to be filled up, at some point, he or she can burst. It's not healthy because the other on a subconscious level also needs to repay the debt and return the gesture. Except we're very helpfully silent on unhealthy models. When I want to overgive, somehow I don't give you the opportunity to start giving to me. And so one partner becomes lazy and only receives. Falling into such a pattern is so convenient. In this convenient form of accepting and becoming lazier, the giving partner still needs to find the energy and resources so that he can continue to fulfill this idealized significance. This happens a lot. Only those who are left deeply entrenched in this form, which is the first of our 4 ways of connecting in a partnership, at one point in time, their symptoms will begin to show themselves. There is no way that this will last very long, because it is not healthy and will not bring harmony in the work that is associated in connecting within the couple. When the other remains indebted, this debt causes him or her to feel frustration. The other person might not have asked for something at that point. The other partner might not have been ready to take on what we wanted to give to him or her. He or she may have another rhythm of existing, doing things, understanding the relationship. But we somehow, in the energy of giving, we forget to think about this different boundary and framework and somehow impose our understanding of existing. And simultaneously, we are both victims and abusers of each other without ever having understood that we are doing this. Because when I try to guess and give and fulfill the other person's notion of what I should be, I am at the same time a victim of myself, because I am damaging, stingy towards myself, frugal with myself. I do not hear my needs. I do not want to recognize them. I set them aside somehow, because I prioritize some other need, standard, value, or I try to even explain and impose on myself that my desires, needs, notions must be the same as that of the partner, so that we can be in sync. So that through gratifying the partner, it is as though I am gratifying myself and fulfilling his or her notions and desires as though they are mine. But in this game of thoughts, on an active-passive principle, in suppression and in battle, who will be the victim and the imposition of control? We are absolutely starting to get lost and increasingly rigid and somehow ossified in our way of connecting. For this reason, in certain patterns of behavior and responsible relationships, in which we can become stuck, the cycle will again lead to a breakdown in the relationship. The symptoms will exhibit themselves, and these disorders will be displayed. Because, as I said, I can convince myself to somehow give up on my models for the sake of others, or convince myself that my model is the same as the one the other has. So that we can walk together like this, at the same time, I am committing violence. I am committing violence to my partner and to myself, because I am starting to put him or her in the position of the less important, somehow more incapable. I, by doing everything, by knowing everything, by finding solutions to everything, by vocalizing everything, by finding the right ways to make things happen, or to meet the other, or to experience something. All at once, I become too strong, and the other becomes too weak. This weakness of the other will accumulate anger, irritation, and we will begin to see in the other person a dissatisfaction, a reactivity and impatience, a provocativeness, causing us to wonder even more, am I really not doing enough for him? Why is he so annoyed and dissatisfied? I've detected so many things that are valuable and necessary for him and given them to him. So why is there such annoyance again? Apparently, I have to give more. And the other one at this point becomes even more irritated, even more dissatisfied, even more lazy. And at some point, the detonation becomes inevitable. Then we wonder what and where everything came from. Inspection of the past can give us a lot of answers. Because when this one remains passive, with no debt repaid to the other partner, she thinks on a subconscious level, it's like we underestimate her in her capabilities. Or it's like we're castrating him and not accepting his unique way of functioning, his different dynamic. He or she has a different way of manifesting the fulfillment of desires. also, again, we do not give the opportunity to this partner to find a way to also start working on herself, with her needs, with her desires. It's like we're afraid to leave her as a little child who's going to become defenseless and won't know how to handle it, and how to take care of it, how to take responsibility for herself. However, these mechanisms lead to this way of being stuck in the world, in which one remains mainly passive and accepting, and the other remains mainly actively giving. And here, the boundaries of the balance will be violated, and the shadow side will show up in this type of connected relationship. The first symptom of this first way of connecting is the shadow side of burnout, when one cannot be so active and the other is not healthy enough to remain passive. Anger, irritation, frustration will appear, as we said, because the other partner remains with an unfinished, unreturned debt to us. Everyone needs to repay their debts in order to clear the mechanism of giving and receiving, to feel useful and significant using the opportunities they have. The second symptom that manifests itself under the shadow side in this way of connection is that one takes the role of the victim, refusing to hear his or her own needs and desires, to satisfy others, and thus to fill the couple. And the other already becomes increasingly lazy and manipulative. They also use different methods to continue to challenge the other, to give to him or her, because such a passive consumer of energy and pleasure is doing very well when one partner gives and feeds the other. But fear is activated. The fear that all this will stop happening. That is, that the other person will decide that they want a change, and that pattern of feeding that happens will stop. And I then will be left alone. And this causes a more anxious vigilance, which can also cause jealousy and irritation. If the one who is giving is very active, also allowing himself to have fun with someone else, or to choose to do something else to meet his own needs, to express at some point some other boundary, this more passive partner or receiver can start to become jealous, to try to get back the one who has fed her so far and somehow has been very special in her inner world, because he performs a very important role for her. The partner must not deviate, because if he strays, I will be left alone. I will be left with this emptiness, with the lack of my activity. Then I have to find a way to work with this emptiness, or start taking on that which is my own personal responsibility. In this way, the battle for control also begins to show up in this type of relationship and connection. The second way of connecting that I also think is not very resourceful, like the one we just looked at, is when both partners are very much in the fire and are very active. Everyone wants to impose their idea of what is right on the other, to argue who is right, to look for convincing facts. Why am I not valued now? I have to be valuable. It has to be what I want or what I don't want. and this activity leads to huge explosions. These kinds of couples, their way of connecting, they are externally smooth. They have a great passion in their companionship, in the way they speak to each other. They can even get to the shadow side, to be offended, swearing, hitting each other, inventing some unpleasant tricks to play on each other, arguing with each other. After that, however, again they will look for a way to create a sense of closeness and measure it. Each is seeking to discover what their limit is, who is right, who at this time needs to be heard or to have their need met. This type of dynamic is not very harmonious. In the beginning, it can be nourishing because the other person is viewed as an object of interest, as a passion to be pursued, as a relationship, as a provocation, as someone to be seduced, as something slightly spicy, very spicy, and then it happens. But at some point, this spiciness will turn out to be hot, and there's no way to cool it down anymore. That is, it can lead to more injuries. Because in the role of two abusers, leaders, or those who want to control the other and what happens simultaneously, the battle inflicts a lot more wounds and consequences. So also, this method of connecting is not very healthy. The third way of connecting that we can look at is when the two partners are equally slow and lazy. In their connection, no one wants to take responsibility, and each transfers it onto the other. Come on, you do it now. No, you're going to do it, aren't you? Why don't I? Oh, when will you? You mean you couldn't do it? Somehow, everyone starts to separate into his or her own space. He has his own things that he does. She has hers. In this situation, there's always a third party who serves them. Here, a lot of parents are present. They give money to this couple. They feed them. They might live with them. Or such a couple can also find some other benefactor who can support them. Friends can make the decisions about going out, about inviting them. Parents bring them something to eat, and they themselves become much more passive. Somehow, the dynamics are very much lulled in this type of relationship. Somehow, like two children who expected the other to take the more active position, they both become so childlike in their meeting as adults. But as two children, they need someone who is a little older, someone who constantly supports them or props them up. They can have fun in a childish way. They can tease each other and so have common interests and things. But the bigger decisions, the more important ones, the clearer boundaries, the taking responsibility, are problematic for both of them and can create conflict. This also leads to a symptomatic friction, which will then burst when they have a dispute or misunderstanding. The fourth way of connecting, which is the most harmonious, is when a pendulum movement is performed, when we realize that we must reach certain agreements as a couple, when we must seek a reciprocity of giving and receiving. I am now active, offering something, creating something, finding a solution, taking responsibility, and being active and doing it for myself and my partner. My partner is experiencing it as I am giving to her at this point, the experience that I have created, whether it was a trip, whether it was a dinner, whether it was for us to read a book, whether it was for us to make a decision. The other receives it, experiences it with me, takes on that energy, and then she also has the need to become active, to repay the debt to me, to return the gesture through something that she can do, to create something for me. The giver and the receiver in the partner relationship are two roles that we need to work out, to consider, first in each of us individually. I at the same time have both needs and two votes and two roles as a giver and a receiver. First of all, on the one side, what are these violations in this internal dialogue with myself? Because if I have these violations in the internal dialogue between the giving self and the receiving self inside of me, of course, I will project these violations in this dialogue with the same deficit on the partner, and the internal projection will become external. When I strive to give a lot, how do I give to others? What do I say? When do I hear their needs, try to be present for them? But do I give to myself? I need to have such a dialogue with myself. When I take stock, when I sit down and write about these things, where am I in this internal dialogue? Do I give enough to myself? Am I generous with myself? This is the first thing to consider, the level of my health in the area of generosity. Generosity means openness. Am I open to hearing my desires and my needs? Can I and do I care for my desires and my needs, or do I relinquish them? Either they don't have a place now, or I don't have to ask for that much anymore, or I'm past the time when I will fight for this now. Or we say that something else is more important: children, work, or other requirements and expectations. Take stock with regard to the generosity I show towards myself. How open am I to hearing myself and pursuing myself? Also consider, what is your level of generosity towards your partner? Because we may be stuck in a cycle, being only over-receiving. Oh, it's so good for me. Now someone will make me dinner, then set it out on the table for me, then they will take care of our child, then they will make decisions for me as to where I should go. Or, on the flip side, why should I think so much? Why should I be generous with myself or with my partner? Where do we have a kink? Where is the deficit? Where do we have a knot, a blockage, a violation? You certainly carry inside you the inner sage. You carry the one that's the balancer. You don't depend on externals. You carry everything in you. The point is to look at your inner navigator, who will tell you when you ask yourself the questions where you really are. Your inner sixth sense, your intuition, your preservation principle, It will prompt you. Your body will react. You know very well where you are. Although we can consciously deceive ourselves into thinking that we're lost, not seeing clearly. But when you start asking the questions, I guarantee you that remaining in silence and asking yourself the questions, you will get the answers. So in the dialogue of the giver and the receiver inside of me, with respect to yourself and with respect to your partner, you can talk about this part. So the first question was about generosity towards your partner and towards yourself, and where there are violations. The second question to ask, after we've considered generosity and openness to oneself and one's partner, is related to the topic of trust. Do I trust myself that I am doing enough? Can I continuously listen and do more for others? Do I trust my own needs? Or does my inner voice say, and what are you going to do for yourself now? You will be considered selfish. You know that your partner will tell you that you only care about yourself, that you want to impose your way, your desires. Where am I? Where are the children? It's this provocative feeling. It's a hook that's poking you from the inside, which is like a critic creating tension. Trust. Trust yourself and trust your partner. Trust that what you give to the partner is enough while maintaining healthy boundaries. This leads us to the next point. Look at the boundaries. Generosity and trust towards myself and my partner are associated with the clear awareness of my own personal boundaries. To what point can I give? How far can I not? In what way do you overestimate yourself? Here you have to think. You overestimate yourself by taking on too many roles to perform. You overestimate yourself in helping more people. You overestimate that over-heavy load which you've taken up to carry. The personal boundary is to what point do I give myself? How far will I go to give to someone else? How far will I go to admit that I can do something and that I can't? But here is the biggest stumbling block, because the fear of confessing the truth, of telling someone, listen, I can give you up to this point, but from here on, I really can't. It's hard for me to have such a limit, to say, I can't fulfill this. I got confused or overestimated myself. I decided that I could be present in all these expressions or ways of relating to others, that I could exchange you for these things. But it turns out I was fooling myself. I'm done. From here on out, you need to find a solution. Or from here on, you need to think about how to help yourself. So that you need to think about how you relate to really understanding yourself in terms of giving and receiving, and that with your partner. It is also very important the permission you give. The next point is the permission you're going to give the other person to take this from you. It's very important to do something consciously, without thinking, if I'm doing something for my partner, I'll do it so that he can appreciate me. I'll do it so that he'll remember to do the same for me later. I will do this if he does that. I will do it with the idea that he will understand what he needs to change and how he should understand me, what he should give to me, what should happen to me. Here it's important to revise whether you're doing and giving to each other with a condition for change. Yes, I understand that we need our expectations and standards to be met, but try to realize the giving, that is, the donation relative to the other, to not contain so many ands, ifs, or buts behind the intention with which you give, because subconsciously it happens like this. I'm going to give to the other person something that will bribe them, but it's on a subconscious level, something with which I can seduce him, so that he will then give me whatever it might be, to change whoever you are for whatever it might be that you want to happen. This is again a game which is slightly more dangerous, in which I seem to be doing it not so much from pure intentions, but with the intention of manipulating someone. Even if I do it with the best of intentions, with my most sincere desire to be helpful, with my greatest willingness to meet the other's expectations, if you look underneath the surface, behind this action, what is really behind the giving to the other person? Perhaps you give a lot to the other person and to others because you are not ready to give so much to yourself. And when you're not ready to give so much to yourself, you have to direct that energy somewhere. You have to point it at someone else, prioritize something else. And it quite often turns out that the one who is fixed more in the role of the giving self, he or she is the one who suffers from not receiving. And quite often, those who overgive, they don't receive. And the one who overreceives starts to have a deficit in giving. That giving, however, will be paid in some way. Nothing can be lost. One partner will pay for it when at some point the other partner says, "This is the end. We're finished. Leave. I can't do this anymore. I want another path. I want a choice. I'm exhausted. I can't fulfill any more of this form of connection of ours." At some point, some processes will be activated when the receiver begins to be active and make something happen, because there is no one to nourish him or her anymore, and he will begin to become a giver, seeking, trying to talk, giving back. But it's still important to understand, why is someone doing what they're doing? Is it because she accepted this new difference? Or because he accepted the boundaries of how far someone can go? And how far we aim with some sort of conditions saying, and, if, or but? Do we want the other person to do something? Or maybe go back to some old way of connecting, or to create change, or something else to happen? That is, what is our goal in all this? There's also a loss going on in this whole understanding of how to really get that debt paid back. So, I've given something. I can measure it. We're at the market. It is then as though this feeling of the pendulum movement has been lost. Now here, I don't want you to get fixated and obsessed with it, to keep a tally sheet of today, who gave what? Tomorrow, how much was returned? It is about developing an inner feeling that resides in you that you just need to open up a little. It can be in the small or the big things. It doesn't matter. Let's just say, if I gave my partner something today, let's say that I canceled an engagement to go home early to help with dinner. I've gone to do the grocery shopping. I have prepared the dinner in his and in my honor. I have taken care of our child. That is, I am giving him the opportunity to stay at work, to fulfill his commitments in what concerns only him and his needs. To cancel this out, to give him the opportunity to look at himself, to see his own boundaries. When I do that, then I let my partner return the gesture. If he doesn't think about it, or he hasn't learned to do it yet, we're the ones who, if we're working towards awareness in these modern relationships, we're the ones who need to be provoked a little. The next day or the next, you could say, please, could you on such and such a day get me this or that? Help me by taking a certain task off my plate? Could you buy me such and such because I've run out of it and I need it? Would you stay with me tonight and let me share something with you? Here, you initiate a little bit your desire to work this out, to create a balance between the giver and the receiver. Don't stay waiting for someone to figure out when and how much to return to you. Do not remain silent, waiting for someone to guess what is happening with you at this moment and what your desire is, which needs to be fed. Don't expect that your ideas will be clearly visible to your partner at this time. Learn to talk to each other. Learn to show yourself to the other. Learn to ask. Learn to talk about what is happening with you at this moment. Because it's different. We have different moods, different experiences, different feelings. Today, I might get up with a little more anxious feeling, a little more oppressive feeling, out of sorts. I need certain things. On the next day and the day after it, maybe I'm more okay, more collected within myself, with more energy. I get up with a more open solution, a more satisfactory level of energy, with more emotion, with a better feeling. In this moment, I want to give, to think something up. The dynamic in me is different. Talk about what your particular boundary is, what you need at this moment. You don't need to be afraid of putting yourself out there. I've heard a lot of my clients say to me, but how am I now going to tell my partner exactly what I want, how I want it, at this point as I imagine it to be? We've been together all these years. Doesn't she know me? It's insulting if he doesn't know me. But why do I have to talk? The magic is lost if I request it or say it. Then I don't care if they do it or not. You see, I think that these are limiting beliefs, some knots that create a blockage in relationships. This is how we create these imbalances, or even the disturbances in relationships. The other person doesn't have to guess. The fact that we have verbalized it doesn't make the magic disappear. At this moment, I can imagine things in a certain way, and others have no way of knowing it. If I'm not responsible for my needs, my change, my desire, my boundary, my understanding of generosity and of giving and receiving, how can the other come into relationship with me? Our partners can never fill whatever it might be, whether it is the emptiness or the lack of personal responsibility or the lack of meaning inside of us. And in terms of us, it's not possible. They can give us a lot of financial opportunities. They can give us a lot of material opportunities. They can give us a lot of emotional support. Everyone according to what they have. And there's still going to be some area where we're not going to be okay, where there's something that we're still missing, something unfinished. That which we've received, we won't be able to appreciate it, to see it. We will fixate ourselves again on something we are lacking, instead of looking at the personal work and personal completeness and personal refusal, looking at the truth in myself as a giver and a receiver of the experience that I carry within me. Unfortunately, no one outside can fill this emptiness. The holes will remain holes. Only through the illusion will we think that something does fill us. But shortly afterwards, we will understand that the hole is still a hole. We have looked at some aspects related to the relationships and frameworks that we create, and the 4 ways in which we shape a vision of connection. I'm glad that we were together. Take what I told you today. Look at how you are on these positions, on these frameworks. I am giving you guidance on how to do this internal work. Thank you for being with me during this time. I wish you a nice ending to your day and a lovely evening that will recharge you. Be filled with love and light, because the choice lies before you. Create kindness in your deeds towards others and towards yourself, and revise the giver and receiver in yourself. Thank you. Goodbye, and see you soon.